Good morning, everyone. Thank you so very much, Agnes. I am Reverend Dr. Lula Mae Phillips. You just call me Lula Mae. What I'm going to do this morning is I'd like to briefly just go over and introduce myself first, and then I want everyone on the line to introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about yourself, because we don't want to be online very long. I am a nurse, and I've been a nurse for a couple of years. I won't say how many years. I'm also a minister, and I've been a minister for about 15 years. And I have a children's ministry. And here at the CTSC, I'm very committed to community research and committed to helping communities and community individuals get involved in research, because research is so healthcare of our society. So I thank you all. Welcome. What I'm going to ask everyone to do that's online, just quickly, no longer than, let's say, a minute, just tell us a little bit about yourself so that we'll all have an idea who's in the program. Okay, first person, we'll start with Allegra, since I'm looking at your name first, and let's just go through the list so everyone will know.
Okay, hi everyone. I actually am also a research assistant at the CTSC. So I helped set up this class a little bit, but Agnes did most of it. She did all the hard work.
Teamwork.
Yeah, I'm excited for all of you to be here and learn more about what brought you to the Community Research Academy and hear some of the great presenters that we have. So yeah, it's nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff? Oh, he's okay. So Pankaj, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me in this course. My name is Pankaj Patel. I am the clinical research manager at Weill Cornell CTSC. Along with our nurse research manager, I help oversee the clinical trials research unit. I'm also the Trial Innovation Network manager, where we help doctors conduct multi-center clinical trials, either at our institution or from other institutions.
Okay, thank you. What, Amara? Could you tell us a little about yourself? Okay. Okay, I didn't hear anything. Dory Garcia, are you on the line? Could you give us a little bit about yourself?
Here. Hi, everyone. My name is Dory Garcia, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director at R16 Washington, Inc. We run 3 senior centers, 1 in Washington Heights and 2 in Harlem. And we also run a transportation department for seniors. So I'm here just to learn more about the research program that you guys have for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Norman Fairweather, are you on the line as well? Is there anyone on the line who'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh,
okay.
He muted himself.
I was muted.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of First Jamaica Community and Urban Development Corporation. We have done some monitoring of people with diabetes and hypertension. We're interested in how to help community to manage their own health. So I'm really interested in what this program offers. Glad that you'll be moving into the space that we have, and looking forward to continued working with you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. How about, is there anyone else on the line who would just like to share with us this morning? Dr. Bruce Rivera, are you on the line?
Yes, good morning. It's a pleasure having an opportunity to be with such a fine cadre of researchers who will help us and introduce us to the subject and to take us along on how to help the disenfranchised communities that we serve. I am senior pastor at Christ Church, United Church of Christ in the Bronx.
I think you muted yourself, Reverend Bruce.
Can you unmute him?
I'm asking to unmute. Okay.
You unmuted him?
Yes, you're unmuted now. I think you had accidentally muted yourself, Reverend Rivera.
And
Oh, again.
You're muted again. Just click unmute once. Yeah, okay, now you're unmuted.
Did you not hear me?
We heard half of what you said. You
you.
muted yourself halfway through accidentally.
Oh, it depends on what has you heard. Okay, quickly, again, I'm the senior pastor at Christ Church, United Church of Christ. I am also a retired psychologist from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I currently serve as the chair of the Bronx Multi-Faith Advisory Group to the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And I'm looking forward to working with this fine cadre of leaders who will help us navigate the research studies so that we can best communicate these research to the people that we serve in our disenfranchised community. Thank you.
Huh?
Thank you.
It smells.
Thank you.
Somebody, okay.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I work at ARC 16, Central Harlem. I'm the site manager there. I am new to this, so I am very excited to participate in this research academy, and I'm ready to go.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
Good.
you.
Good. Okay, do we have anyone else who would like to share? Okay. Well, I thank all of you for, okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mimi Jackson. I happen to know Norman Fairweather. We belong to the same church. I am particularly interested in this course of study. I'm interested in community research also, but I do not have a research background. I'm particularly interested as a recent cancer survivor in cancer research in the community and how it is really taking over. And I'm interested in learning about research and research methods and how I can be of assistance.
Great, great, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Okay, well, I thank all of you for joining us today on this very exciting initiative. This is the first time we are doing the Community Research Academy in this way, and Zoom just happened to come along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all of you to take a look when you can, if you haven't already, at your syllabus, because I'd like for you to go over it. Today, what I would just like to point out to you is just several things. One, the mission of this Community Research Academy is to introduce community members to the translational research process, which is research that starts in scientific labs and extends to the bedside of the sick. And this is done in many, many ways. So today, what we're going to do, this whole entire program is just going to talk about how we use translational research, how we speed up the research process. And in doing that, our objectives for this particular program is to uncover the connections among community health profiles, zip codes, and what does it have to do with research. We're going to discuss research and ethics, That means Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks. We're going to review various research methods. We're going to explore how the iPhone and phone apps are used in research. We are encouraging fellow community members to explore various positions. And basically what we're asking you, every participant, to do is take a look at the various programs that we have and think about it in terms of workforce development, passing the information off into the Boy Scouts, into schools, into daycares, into the community, as so that the community members can prepare to become involved in the workforce program here at Weill Cornell Clinical Translational Science Center. We champion research problems, like Norman was saying that at First Presbyterian Church of Jamaica, how they work to increase the health of the community and getting the community involved. One of the things we want each and every person to do, and there's going to be a project, is to start thinking about a research project, start thinking about a health issue, and start taking pictures, not of people's faces, but of the problems. Well, never take the faces, because if you do, then it's a whole consenting process, and we don't want to do that. But we want you to look at health issues in the community, and then think about what you can do about it. And we're going to do a project later on. We're going to encourage you to do a project. Utilize basic skills to review grant proposals, because one of the things that we're going to ask all of you guys to do is to get involved in research at the Clinical Translational Science Center in various ways. But we'll discuss those ways later on in the program. So with this program, you will have assignments, but they're all easy assignments. And the assignments are, we'll ask you to take a look at videos on YouTube. We've given you a minimum of 3, sometimes a little more, and just pick 3 or 4 and take a look at them. And come prepared with questions on the videos. And we're also asking all of you to take a look. These are free. Everything we do is free, free, free. The Association of Clinical Research Professions has a course, and we're asking you to sign up for that course. And the course is on ethics, and the other is on clinical trials. So that's what we'd like you to take a look at. But if you have questions, you have my phone number. What I will do at the end of this session is give all of you my cell number. So if you have a pressing question, you can call me and ask me after the class is over, because I didn't want to make it too much. If you want to email me, you will also have my email address. And if you want to email any of the presenters, I'm sure they'll be willing and open to receive your emails. So with that said, I will now be turning the program over to Mr. Jeff Zhu, who is the Managing Director of Community Engagement and Research here at Weill Cornell Medicine Clinical Translational Science Center. Jeff?
Good morning, everyone. All right, so Agnes, could you stop sharing your screen so I can share mine? Thank you. All right, does everybody see the PowerPoint slides?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All righty, so my name is Jeff Zhu. I serve as the Managing Director of Community Engagement and Research here at the Weill Cornell Clinical and Translational Science Center. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to sort of give you guys a quick introduction to what is translational research, because that's something we haven't defined yet. And one of the things that we hate the most is when scientists use jargon and don't bother defining it for us, right? So I'm going to explain a little bit about what translational research is. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Clinical and Translational Science Center and what we do in the community engagement and research component. So get started, translational research. Oh, sorry, we have somebody in the waiting room. Yeah, thanks, perfect. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about translational research. So there's two traditional types of research that many of you may have heard about. The first is basic research. So basic research is when you sort of think about people in a lab with test tubes, petri dishes, that kind of stuff. That's what we consider basic research. The second traditional type of research is clinical research. And that's when scientists are testing new drugs and treatments in humans. So if you think about a clinical trial for a drug, for example, or a new treatment, that's clinical research. And so the idea of translational research is relatively new. It probably came about in the late 90s, I would say. And that was the idea of bridging, of connecting basic and clinical research. Because one of the major issues with getting research is that you get a lot of discoveries in the lab, but actually taking those discoveries and transforming it into a new drug or a new treatment is actually a very difficult process. And for a lot of science, that's where it failed. A lot of great discoveries that you hear about all the time in the news, they never make it past that basic lab stage. And so to get around that, we've created the sort of translational research term. And that's sort of to bridge the two. And its translational research is divided into several phases. So phase 0 is basic research. And that's sort of like I said before, the lab stuff, for which we think of scientists working in the lab. And then phase 1 is translation to research. And that's the equivalent of what you think of a phase 1 clinical trial. And that's really just phase 1 clinical trial means that once you've developed the new drug or treatment, you want to test, is this safe in humans? And so that's what phase 1 is. And then translation to patients is what we consider sort of phase 2 and 3 clinical trials. And phase 2 and 3 is we're trying to determine, is this treatment effective? And so I think a lot of you might have been hearing the term phase 2 or phase 3 in the news lately with relation to the COVID-19 vaccines. A lot of those trials have made it to phase 3, and that phase 3 is you're trying to say, hey, does this vaccine actually work? In phase 1 and phase 2, you're actually trying, is this thing safe? What sort of dosage do we need to give people to make this effective? And then phase 3 is you're trying to actually figure out, does this treatment actually work? Can we actually give it to people and have it prevent them from getting COVID, for example? So that's the second phase of translational research. And then there's translation to practice. And this is another important step because you also, once you've figured out, hey, this new sort of treatment works, and let's use COVID again as an example, now you have to actually get people to take the vaccine race, right? Once you've developed it. So that's the third part of translational research, the translation to practice. And then the final part is translation to the community. And this is what we're thinking about is looking at community or population level outcomes. So the entire community or the entire nation, entire state or city. And the example, again, using COVID as an example, would be once we've administered the vaccine, has it been effective in preventing people from getting infected? So that would be what we would consider phase 4 of the translation research process, or translation to the community. Has this treatment we've come up with, this vaccine, been effective in reducing COVID across the entire nation or the entire city? So hopefully that gives you a quick idea. Any questions about the translational research process before I go on? Okay, cool. So I do a quick sort of introduction to what the CTSCs are. So to what I had talked about earlier about translational research process was really didn't develop until the 90s. And to sort of enable this to happen across the nation, the National Institutes of Health created the Clinical and Translational Science Awards program. And so the purpose of this program, they have this very detailed paragraph I'll read. The CTSA program is designed to develop innovative solutions that will improve the efficacy, quality, and impact of the process for turning observations in the lab, clinic, and community into interventions that improve the health of individuals and the public. So that is a very sort of dense, I guess, definition of what the CTSA program is. But I like to just summarize it simply as the CTSAs across the nation are an infrastructure that provides resources to investigators to make translational research happen. So really, that's our goal. Help researchers conduct translational research. And so there are currently 62 CTSAs across the nation. This is a map of all of them. Really, the entire group, in each individual CTSC has its own goals, but then the entire group or entire network of CTSAs rather, work together in collaboration as well to try to improve translational research. And so we, presenting here today, are part of the Weill Cornell Medicine Clinical and Translational Science Center. So the name is not very original. We received the Clinical and Translational Science Award, so we decided to call ourselves a Clinical and Translational Science Center. Other CTSAs across the nation have various other names. But I want to give you a quick overview about what we are and what we do. So in the middle over there, the administrative core and the operations committee is really the leadership, I guess, the decision-making bodies of the CTSC. So the administrative core consists of the program directors, or the principal investigator, and the core directors are part of the operations committee. So those are the leaders of the individual components or parts of the CTSC. And I'm gonna describe that a little bit more in detail. And then sort of advising and providing input and feedback to the leadership of the CTSC is the External Advisory Board. So this is made up of representatives from other CTSAs, from industry, from the government, the NIH, as well as a community member. We also have a Community Advisory Board, and that is actually part of the community component. And this is, I'll talk a little bit more about this group later, but again, their job is to advise and provide feedback on the CTSC. What's unique about our Community Advisory Board is that unlike a lot of other ones, we actually give them a lot of decision-making power and review power at the CTSC. And you'll learn a little bit more about that later on when I talk about the community section. Finally, there's also two other groups that advise the core, and that's the Internal Leadership Council. So the CTSC is actually not just Weill Cornell, we're actually a collaboration of many institutions. So you'll see sort of the partner list at the bottom, but we're partners with the Hospital for Special Surgery, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Cornell University Cooperative Extension, Cornell University, Hunter College, and the Hunter College School of Nursing, as well as the CUNY School of Public Health and the Animal Medical Center. So the representatives from each of these partner institutions make up the Internal Leadership Council. And then finally, we have an evaluation and tracking component. And their job is to, hey, assess how are the different groups doing, how the different components doing, and provide feedback and metrics to evaluate that. So what do I mean by component? So the CTSC is divided up into all these sort of blue boxes you see at the bottom are what we call components. You can think of them as like departments or divisions. They're essentially parts of the CTSC with their own sort of goals. And so, for example, informatics, they're responsible for the databases and the IT support for the CTSC. The community and collaboration component, that's us, and I'll talk about us a little bit more. And then we also have translational endeavors. And so it's a fancy term, but essentially what it refers to is our pilot grant program. So we give out grants for many purposes. I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And we also have a workforce development. And for this, it's really just how do we, I guess, do networking events to connect scientists and physicians, and how do we train these individuals? So some of that stuff is there. We also have a component for research methods, and this one is the biostatistics group. So they are the statisticians that help researchers design studies and make sure that they're scientifically valid. And also part of this is regulatory knowledge and support. And that term is just a fancy way of saying protection, the IRB, which is an institutional review board, which is responsible for protection of human subjects, to make sure that research is conducted ethically and with the interests of all the participants in mind. So regulatory knowledge, it comprises the IRB, responsible for that, as well as the TRAC committee, which stands for Translational Research Advisory Committee. And while the IRB looks at protection of human subjects, the TRAC committee looks at the science of individual projects to make sure that any project is properly designed scientifically. And then we also have, we have somebody else in the waiting room, Agnes. The next component is the hub research capacity. And this refers to several resources we have to support researchers at the CTSC. And they include a research navigation team. So it's a team of research aides that Pankaj will probably talk a little bit more about. They help investigators make their studies happen. And we also includes the inpatient and outpatient unit, where we can help with clinical research studies, as well as a core lab. So it's a group of labs essentially that are dedicated to supporting research studies. Then we have a network capacity, and this refers to the national collaborations. So when I put up that map of the 62 CTSAs earlier, the network capacity component is responsible for coordinating research and efforts with the rest of the CTSA network. Then we also do have two other optional modules. One is veterinary medicine and one is precision medicine. So as a brief overview, veterinary medicine is an important component for clinical trials and translational research because a lot of the drugs and treatments that work in humans actually also work in other large mammals. And so one of the ways to speed up translational research is actually to test drugs in large animals or drugs that have already been tested in large animals. You can actually speed up the process of testing in humans. So we created a veterinary medicine component and involved the Animal Medical Center to sort of achieve that goal. And then we also have precision medicine, and that's sort of the latest, I guess, buzz term in research. And that's just reference to the idea that when you're doing a lot of treatments these days, you can actually tailor, traditionally when you treat people, physicians have treated the disease more so than the actual patients. However, there's been a lot of, I guess about changes in the mindset where, you know, a lot of diseases can be treated more as for the individual person. It will actually manifest itself differently in individual people. So precision medicine is that idea, is that you tailor the treatment to the particular patient. And we have a component for that as well. And finally, we also have an institutional career development core and a training core. And these are responsible for training researchers and students in what is translational research. So quick overview. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the community engagement and research component. So our primary goal is to build trust with the communities of New York City. And really along that lines, we have two major goals, which is to disseminate health to the communities of New York City. And we do this by partnering with communities to prevent or identify disease at an early stage. And we educate communities on medical best practices. Our second major goal is to increase engagement of New York City communities in all phases of research. And what do I mean by all phases of research? Those are those four phases of translational research I talked about at the beginning. And we accomplish this by involving communities in the research process as partners and decision makers. And we provide a platform for participation of historically underrepresented groups in clinical trials and other research. And finally, we guide and support investigators with infrastructure and resources to help make community-based research possible. And so this is a map of New York City, and we've got several major programs we do, and it's just laid out by program type and where we've held those events across New York City. So most of the events are in East Harlem, Flatbush, Central Brooklyn area, as well as the South Bronx. Staten Island, we've only had a couple of events there over the years at one particular site, but we are trying to reach Staten Island one. And I'll talk a little bit about, don't worry about the individual programs, I'm actually gonna go through them one by one now. So the first major community outreach program we have is called the Heart to Heart Community Outreach Campaign. And this is a free health screening and intervention program for minority and low income communities across New York City. That's really the primary goal of this program, is to provide these free health screenings and interventions. We're also training future health professionals, and we're gathering some data on the health disparities and barriers to healthcare access. And so the underserved and the minority communities are traditionally very hard to get involved in the research process. So in addition to providing these health screenings, we've got a unique opportunity to look at what are some of the major issues these individuals encounter and accessing healthcare and affording healthcare. And so we've actually got 2 publications currently being drafted on this particular study. And so at these health screenings, we provide height, weight, BMI, which is body mass index, and blood pressure. We also do blood tests on the spot for diabetes and heart disease. And then afterwards, we actually sit down participants with a medical professional. So it could be a medical student, a nursing faculty member, a physician, and they'll actually explain the results and provide some recommendations for lifestyle and other changes to improve their health. We also have a group from the New York Presbyterian Hospital Registered Dietitian Program that they'll actually come and do nutrition consultations with all the participants. And we also have an ophthalmology team that comes to some events. And ophthalmology, for those who don't know, is just an eye doctor, essentially. And they'll do a bunch of screenings for eye health and eye disease. And they'll actually have a separate physician on site as well to give a separate eye disease medical consultation. And finally, for individuals who need assistance with further follow-up, we give them resources to access free or low-cost clinics in the community, or we'll refer them to the Weill Cornell free community clinic. And we also have worked with a group called NADAP to help those who are uninsured obtain insurance. And so these are the events. We started this program in March of 2010, and as of February of this year, we've had 130 events. We haven't had any further events since February because of the lockdown of COVID. And then in terms of are we actually reaching the proper populations, we've come up with a couple sort of metrics to see. Our goal is to reach the underserved. Are we actually successful in that? And so about 20% of our participants live below the federal poverty line. And this definition changes over the years, but it's currently defined as about $21,000 a year for a family of four. Of course, this being New York City, the cost of living is obviously much higher. So we also look at what percentage of our participants live below a living wage. And so a living wage for New York City is defined as about $65,000 a year for a family of four. And 58% of our participants do not make a living wage. And then finally, we look at the uninsured rate, and about 27% of our participants are uninsured. And then in terms of the race breakdown, for most of our programs, our goal is to reach as many minorities as possible, and we've been pretty successful in that. About 62% or 55% are African American or Black, 7% are non-Black Latino, and 15% are Asian. So you're looking at about a 77% minorities that we're reaching with the Heart to Heart program. We also look a little bit about some of the health metrics that we're evaluating. So we look at individuals' hemoglobin A1C, and this is just an indicator for diabetes. And if we look at it, more than half, so this is one of the most shocking findings, at least to me, is that majority of the people we screen are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. So I think for me, that is the, I guess, most shocking thing to find, is that for the majority of people we screen are actually not healthy in this particular case. And when we look at the numbers, we started tracking this in 2013. We've identified 701 new cases of prediabetes and diabetes. So these are people who had no idea they were diabetic or pre-diabetic and found out as a result of attending these events. And we also did something similar for our blood pressure. We identified 473 new cases of high blood pressure since 2013. And again, for total cholesterol, it's about the same. We've identified about 827 new cases of high total cholesterol, and about a third of the people we screen have high total cholesterol. The second major program we take part in is community interactive video conferencing. And really, this program is our health educational arm. So I won't go through all the details, but the goal of this is really, we use video conferencing like we're doing today to bring health education on a variety of topics to faith-based centers, senior centers, and other community centers across New York City. And again, go over some couple stats real quickly. These are all the events we've held since 2009 when we started this program. We had 316 events and about 4,000 participants. And again, majority of the participants have been minorities. After each event, we do a survey and we ask individuals, will you make a change to your lifestyle based on, as a result of attending this talk? And about 88% said yes. And of course, people will say yes, and what they actually do is different. So we actually call these individuals up after 3 months, We asked how many actually made a lifestyle change, and about half of them, 48% actually did. So it's been a pretty successful program for us. And then our other major program is the Opioid Overdose Prevention Program. And so the opioid epidemic has been a major issue throughout New York City. And we've been working with a lot of our community partners, and some of them in the South Bronx and East Harlem told us they've literally had people dying on the doorsteps of their churches from opioid overdoses. And unfortunately, a lot of the research, or a lot of the efforts from the research community is focused on developing new non-addictive drugs, which is great, but that process takes decades, if not longer. So we wanted to intervene early on and prevent deaths immediately. So we're doing this through education. So education and then training of community members on how to recognize an opioid overdose, and then how to actually administer naloxone, which is the antidote. And then we also train community members in rescue breathing and hands-only CPR to also save their lives if they stop breathing. And then we distribute free naloxone kits at these events. So that way, our goal is to raise awareness in community, and then train a large number of community members and give them these kits. So if they encounter a loved one or a neighbor or a family member who is overdosing, they can save their lives. And then we started this program in 2018 in March, and we've had about 213 events since then. We've had 67 volunteer staff and students who we've trained as naloxone educators. So these are individuals who go out in the community and train community members. And we've trained, again, almost 3,000 community members. The numbers have gone up, actually, since February. And again, majority of these are minorities. So about 59% are non-Black and Latino, and 21% African-American or Black. And we know that at least 48 people have used one of our kits to save a life. We've collected 48 reports so far. And we've distributed 5,500, by now about 5,600 free naloxone kits to community members. And then the other major thing we do is we do provide support for researchers and to make translational research happen. And so since 2014, we've supported 10 studies, helped them recruit 608 research subjects. And again, a large number of studies that we support, everything including testing new point of care drug tests, in this case, one for iron levels. We've also done stuff in disease spread and early childhood development. And we've also had about 63 events that we did with community members to help actually recruit for these studies. And then finally, in the last, I guess, 3 minutes I want to briefly talk about our community research pipeline. And for this, what I mean is that one of our major goals is to get community members like yourselves involved in the research process. So to help make this possible, we do two major things. One is that we train our investigators, so the students who take part in CTSC courses, and we train them, give them classes about what is community-based participatory research. And on the other hand, we also train community members, such as yourselves, through the Community Research Academy, this course, to learn a little bit more about the research process, and hopefully in the future, get involved in the research with our investigators here at Cornell. And then we also have a community research planning grant. So these are small $5,000 grants we give individuals to work with a community partner, or a community partner to work with a researcher to develop a research study. And then once they develop this research study, they can apply to various pilot grants we have, including a dedicated pilot grant for community engagement research. So pilot grants are smaller grants, usually in the $20,000 to $50,000 range, to test out a new research idea. That's why they're called sort of pilot. They're pilot testing an idea to see if it's worth pursuing further. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, we do have a community advisory board at the CTSC, and this consists of community members from across the city with a large diversity of race, gender, and communities in different boroughs being represented. So we have individuals from faith-based organizations, local government, community advocates, and other not-for-profit healthcare organizations. And it's really a diverse group. The majority are female. I think there's 3 guys in the room, one of them being myself, every time we hold these meetings. And it's in all races are represented. And really, like I said earlier, we give our community advisory board as much decision-making power as we can, because at least myself personally and everybody else at the Weill Cornell CTSC, we believe strongly in ensuring that there is a community voice in everything we do, and that community members have the chance to give their input. And so our main way of accomplishing this is that we give community advisory board members the power to review our grants. So typically when individuals or scientists, researchers submit grants to an institution, it's reviewed by their peers, other scientists, what we call the peer review process, and then which research is funded is made by them. So we've modified that process by requiring that all our grants be reviewed in addition to the scientific reviewers by community members as well. And the community members are given equal weight in the scores, and there are equal number of community reviewers as there are scientific reviewers. And so we started doing this in 2017, initially with just the community grant applications, but in 2019 we expanded this to all of the pilot applications received by the CTSC. And yeah, and that is it for me. Any questions? Oh, Lula, do you want me to do questions now, or do you want me to wait until after Pankaj?
Sure, no, you can do questions now. Do a couple of minutes of questions. Sure, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Jeff,
So this is a photo. Let me just say, this is a photo of the Heart to Heart team. So I definitely want to thank all of them and all the nursing students, medical students, and the physicians who volunteer their time to make these events possible. Right.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. I just wanted to know, would the PowerPoint presentation be available for us?
Yes, you will be able to, everybody should receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentations.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah.
The whole entire presentation will be on YouTube. So if you want to go back to it, you can.
And Agnes will send out a link to the recording of today's class.
Yes, she will.
All right. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you so very much, Jeff, for that very informative presentation. Now we will have Pankaj Kumar Patel to tell us a little bit more.
Thank you, Lula and Jeff. Hi, everyone. And Jeff has already given you a brief description of what clinical trials are, so I will just expand on that and I will talk more about clinical trials. So as you may have already learned, that new tests and treatments aren't offered to the public as soon as they're made available. They have to go through clinical trials. And what are clinical trials? So clinical trials are carefully designed studies which test the benefit and risks of a specific medical treatment or an intervention, such as the new drug behavior or a behavior change. Once the researchers have completed a rigorous screening and preclinical testing, the company or the drug, the company that has made the drug will have to file for an investigational new drug application with the FDA. The FDA is the regulatory body that oversees all of drug and devices studies that are going on in this country. This application will allow investigational medicine to be tested in human volunteers and in clinical trials. So what does a clinical trial test? So they test new drugs that are not approved by the FDA. They test the drugs that are already approved, but different uses of those drugs. They will test that. They will test new ways to give drugs, such as a pill form or an infusion form. So these are the various types of clinical trials that go through the regulatory process. So every clinical trial has to be led by a principal investigator. So the principal investigator is usually the doctor that is in charge of the clinical trial, along with a team of research staff. The FDA requires multiple phases of clinical trials. Jeff has already alluded to those phases. I will just give you a brief description on those phases in a little while. So they have to complete the phases of these phases before deciding if the investigational product is safe and effective for a broader patient population. Usually, the number of human volunteers in those clinical trials increases as the treatment moves through the different phases, which is why it takes almost a decade to get a drug approved. So, like I said, clinical trials are carefully designed, reviewed, and completed. The principal investigator is the person that is in charge of the trial. They are the scientists that are the expert on what the clinical trial is about. They will take lead in designing the clinical trial, choosing the research team, and carrying out the study. So before a study or a clinical trial starts at an institution or at a site, they have to go through a regulatory review board called the Institutional Review Board. So the IRB, while Cornell has such an IRB where they review every single clinical trial that is conducted at the institution, the IRB consists of at least 5 members. These are 5 members from various backgrounds. They're scientific experts, non-scientific experts, and members that are not affiliated with the institution. And these are competent members who are able to review, evaluate, and evaluate the science and the medical aspects of the proposed clinical trial. So before a study starts, the IRB is responsible for reviewing the science and the ethics of the study. Once the IRB approves the study, only then can the study be conducted. So the IRB will review documents such as the research protocol, the consent form, any advertising materials the study may have. So the IRB is responsible for reviewing all of these materials and then providing approval. And once the approval has happened, the investigator is responsible for compliance. The investigator is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the study is compliant with all IRB and good clinical practices requirements. If there are any deviations, they must report those deviations to the IRB. And once the study is conducted, once the study is in the process of, once the study is ongoing, basically, only then, and if there are any adverse events or any serious adverse events, they must be reported to the IRB immediately. Otherwise, that's considered a major deviation. And when the time comes for the drug approval, the FDA will look at all of these data to see if all of these adverse events were reported in a timely manner or not. So I will talk more about the terms, the common terms that are usually in clinical trials. So you may hear subjects. So subjects are basically the people who volunteer to take part in a study. They may also be referred to as participants or patients. You'll hear terms such as randomized clinical trial. So randomized means subjects are randomly assigned to different treatment groups. Open label, you'll also hear that. That means subjects, the patients, the participants, and the researchers are aware of the drug that's being given. You'll hear a term called blinded, a single blinded study or a double blinded study. So blinded study, a single blinded study is when the subject does not know which group they're being, which treatment group they're part of. A double blinded study is when the researcher and the subject don't know which group they are, don't know which which treatment group they're in until the end of the study. A placebo is a substance which does not contain the active ingredient of an experimental drug, but it looks exactly the same as the experimental drug. Then you'll hear a single center or a multi-center. A single center study is a study that's being conducted only at one institution. Multi-center study is a study that's conducted at several institutions. So our CTSA, like Jeff provided some information on, we work with other CTSAs in the country to conduct multi-center clinical trials. The phases of clinical trials. So before even the phase 1 starts, there's preclinical research, and that's basically done in the lab to see, sometimes it is conducted on animals, the preclinical trials, to see if the drug is safe. Then the phase 1 study is when it translates to humans. And the phase 1 studies are studies that are that aim to find the best dose for a new drug with the fewest side effects. So the drug will be tested in a small group of patients, about 15 to 30 patients. And they start, the investigators start by giving very low doses of the drug to these few patients. The drug may help patients, but that's not what they're really looking for. They're only looking to see if it's safe at that point. But then at phase 2, they open it up to a larger group of people, a couple of hundred or so, and that's when they test the safety and the efficacy of the drug as well. Phase 3 is when the study goes over 100 or maybe in the few thousands. So that's when they compare the drug to the current standard of care drug. So for example, in an oncology study, there may be already an approved drug, but another company might want to create a compound with a different component of this to treat the same type of cancer. So that company will test their investigational drug with the already approved drug to see if their investigational product is safe and efficacy as well. So often these trials are randomized. That means the patients are put into a treatment group called different trial arms, and they're put into these groups by chance. Basically, that's what it means by when they say it's randomized. So the patient may either be randomized to the current standard of care treatment or to the new treatment, the experimental group as well. So there can be more than 2 treatment groups in phase 3 trials. The control group, like I mentioned, is the standard of care treatment. The other group gets the new treatment, which is being studied. So if it's double-blinded, neither the doctor nor the subject will know which group they're in. So this will produce results, better results at the end of the study. So that the ultimate goal of the clinical trial is to get that investigational drug approved. And once they see that the investigational drug works as good as the comparative drug, then that's when they know the results are good and they're ready to apply for FDA approval at that time. Usually phase 3 is needed right before FDA approval. And phase 4 is when the FDA could have already approved the drug, and then a study can go on to phase 4, which is done at larger, at a community level. The drug is tested in several hundreds of thousands of patients, and this allows for better research. And they look at long-term data in phase 4 to see if there are any side effects long-term, meaning phase 4 can be as long as 10 years. So, and there are important questions for one to ask when they're joining a clinical trial. And the clinical trials are they're an important treatment options for people with rare diseases or people with cancer. So there may not be treatment available for all those types of disorders. So your doctor or they may provide a clinical trial as the last option, and sometimes they may be the right option for that person. So before a clinical trial, before you join a clinical trial, there are some important questions that one should be asking. So they should be asking the first question they should ask is there a clinical trial that I can join if there are no other treatment options available, or if that's the last thing you need to resort to? What is the purpose of that clinical trial? What kind of tests and treatment does that study involve? Does the treatment have any, what are the risks and the benefits? Has the treatment been used before, or has it been used in other types of cancers? Will I know which treatment will I receive? If it's a blinded study, will I receive the treatment, or what are my chances of receiving the treatment? So these are some of the important questions that one may ask their doctor or the research study team when they're partaking in the research. So one of the biggest aspects of a clinical trial is the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the inclusion criteria is everything that a study must have or the patient must have in order to be included in the study. And exclusion criteria are factors that would make the patient ineligible to included in the study. So these are some of the important aspects that are part of being in a clinical trial. And these are some of the questions that are important to ask your doctor or an investigator before joining a clinical trial. And these are questions that you'll ask during the informed consent process. So before you join a clinical trial, you will have to review the informed consent form. It's a few pages long, and that informed consent form will describe the study in detail. It will include the risks and benefits. You'll be able to fully read it, and you will have all your questions answered. Investigators encourage that you take your time to read the consent form, read it with your family members, read it with your friends, and ask any and all questions that you may have. And once you do decide to partake in the study, you must sign the informed consent form. And if you're ineligible to sign, if it's a study done, if it's a study done in children, then the parents must sign the consent form, and the children must sign the assent form. So these are basically the basics of partaking in a clinical trial. The research team, while the trial is going on, they may learn of new benefits and risks during the study. And if you feel that you're at risk, the patient can at any time, you don't need to give a reason, may leave a clinical trial. So if you feel uncomfortable, if a patient feels uncomfortable in a clinical trial, they may leave the study at any time without any questions being asked by the research team. You can leave the study for any time for any reasons. So basically, staying in the study is your choice. So an example of a clinical trial that we have ongoing right now, as you may have heard in the news, is the COVID vaccine trials. So at Cornell, we are a part of a study right now that's enrolling nationwide. It's enrolling up to 30,000 patients. It's a phase 3 randomized observer blinded placebo-controlled study. So like I said, it's a phase 3. So the patients are randomized either to a placebo or the actual vaccine. So it's a vaccine study. The patients may either be randomized to a placebo or they may actually get the vaccine. And the phase 3 study is there to evaluate the efficacy, the safety, and the immunogenicity of the vaccine. And it's being conducted in patients from 18 to 65, patients that are 18 years old up to 65 years old with no known history of COVID infection. So what are some of the challenges that are faced in clinical trials? So clinical trials, there was a recent article published in Stat News. So clinical trials have been plagued for years by the biggest problems in clinical trials are they don't recruit enough people, and they fail to reflect the diversity of our nation. So researchers whose job is to field clinical trials with participants have begun teaming up with tech companies, with communities, to find modern solutions that are ongoing in clinical trials. So the first fact is that 25% of all cancer trials, they fail to enroll many participants as are needed. And 18% of those trials are closed without fewer than half of the target number that are required for recruitment. And 86%, they don't meet those recruitment targets. And these failures have significant scientific and financial costs as well. Financial costs for the sponsor, scientific costs for the research team that's conducting the study. So failing to recruit enough participants can jeopardize the results of a trial. So before a study is designed, they go through a study design, and they determine the exact number of patients needed to produce a significant scientific data. So if you don't produce that significant scientific data, your study will not be approved. And these are the costs that happen if a study does not meet the recruitment expectations. So they can fail even if they manage to recruit a number of participants, because the participants may not be diverse enough to produce the knowledge. So what are some of the what are these disparities? Why are these disparities? So they're not confined to race alone. Most clinical trials lack participations from ethnic, gender, and sexual minorities, as well as elderly, people who live in rural areas, and individuals of varying socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's very important for us to team with community to educate everybody about what clinical trials are, and for the community to make an informed decision of participating in clinical trials. So the focus has to be on engagement and the science of building relationships with and partnerships with the community members. So that's it for my end. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take questions.
I've got a question for you. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. I know that you talked a lot about the process and people needing to, all of the participants in any kind of study, you have to earn their trust, obviously. I was wondering, I know that there are a lot of responsibilities that people who perform clinical trials and you know, there are a lot of requirements that they have to fill. And I'm sure that it comes with enormous administrative tasks too. Do all of the administrative personnel also have to conform to all of, you know, as far as maintaining privacy and all of those things for the patients as well? How do they extend it beyond just the people who perform the tests?
Sure. So when a clinical trial is being performed at a center, the most involved individuals in a clinical trial setting are the research coordinators, the research assistants. They are basically the backbone of the study. They work with the participants directly to ensure all the data they maintain is private, is maintained in a safe manner. They ensure the administrative aspects of the study as well. So at the CTSC, our team, we have a team of research assistants that work on a daily basis with patients. They provide the informed consent. They provide the essential part of trial participation. They provide all of that information to the patients. And at the same time, we let the patients know on how we will maintain their data in a private manner, in a safe manner. And we will make sure to work with the patients directly for any questions that may arise during their participations in the clinical trial. So in terms of the administrative staff, everybody that has any participant contact has to take any individual that is part of the study, part of any type of research, has to take training called the basics of good clinical practice. So this training goes over on how to maintain good clinical practices in terms of maintaining data, maintaining ethics, and such as well.
Thank you.
This is Jeff. Sort of just to expand on what Pankaj was saying, in terms of the training requirements, they're actually the same for anybody who's involved in the research process. So that could be anybody with contact with any of the participants or anybody who even just sees the data. They have the same requirements as a PI or principal investigator in terms of required trainings that they have to accomplish. So there's some variance between different institutions, but at least at Cornell, anybody who has any role in the research study has to take the required trainings.
Thank you.
Okay, there was a question that was sent in the chat. What has to change legally, socially, etc., to include those age 65 and older? Thank you.
What has to change legally, socially to include those age? Well, that's a decision that was made when the study design was occurring. So if right now, once the reason they chose that age, so the study that we're conducting is sponsored by a pharmaceutical company, and those are decisions that they have made. And the reason they came to those decisions, because this study is open only to healthy volunteers who are at risk of being in contact with somebody with COVID. So age 65 and above will, right now, as we know, COVID has severe effects on the elderly population. So including those patients will not produce proper data for the vaccine. So at the moment, that's the age that the company has decided to be part of the inclusion criteria. But once it goes through the phase 4, those restrictions will expand and include even patients above 65 as well.
Hi, Francie. I think we actually got a similar question to this yesterday at another event, and I think you might have the same question: is why is it that a lot of seniors, those 65 and older, are not eligible for research studies? I think that might be what you're alluding to.
Yes.
And there are many reasons for that, but one of the major ones is that seniors are considered a special population by the National Institutes of Health. So there are additional protections required for that particular group. So it could be, individuals may have cognitive impairment, they aren't able to provide consent, so there are special protections in place for that. The other issue that a lot of research studies have is that if you're looking at the effectiveness of a drug for, say, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, you want to test it. The drug companies, it's very expensive to do these trials. So the companies who sponsor this prefer to test it in individuals that they can be reasonably sure are going to still be around in 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, as you get older and older, the likelihood if you enroll somebody who's, say, let's say 80 years old in a trial, the likelihood that they'll still be around in 10 years is not as high. So the drug companies would prefer to recruit somebody who's younger for that in that particular case. There's also a lot of issues with if individuals are on multiple drugs. So the older you are, you tend to be on more medications. And unfortunately, if you're testing a particular drug, you don't want to you want preferably to have that individual on no other medications aside from the drug you're testing. And unfortunately, for a lot of seniors, that's a very difficult requirement to meet. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Pankaj.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to open up the poll at the bottom of the screen. And if you guys could take a couple of minutes, and if you have any more questions, feel free to ask while you answer the poll.
Okay, before you guys sign off, I want to tell everyone thank you so very much for participating today. Thank you very much to the speakers. You both did great jobs. Thank you so very much. I'd like to just invite all of you back for the next part 2, next session, which will be next week at the same time. Come with ideas, come with questions, but I want you also to start thinking about research in terms of where you live, the jobs that you do, and how can research change what you are currently doing, because it really can. And I want you to start thinking about what research can do to improve or make your life or make the lives of the people in your community better. So just keeping that in mind. Agnes will be sending you out some information and on different topics that we'd like for you to take a look at and be prepared. You will also get my telephone number and my email. And if you have questions, you can give me a shout out, or you could just type me a little note and I will answer you. So if you have any questions, anyone have any question? If all minds are clear, I thank you so very much. We did well. We're finishing close to on time. As a matter of fact, we are a couple of minutes early. And for me, I think that makes a round of applause. So thank you all so very much, unless you have a question.
Yeah. The poll is anonymous, by the way, so don't have to worry about getting questions wrong.
I took the poll, I'm clicking submit, and nothing's happening. Should something happen when I click submit?
No,
The
nothing
screen doesn't
happened.
clear, I don't get a thank you. I
Oh,
do not know if it took.
well, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't get anything back either.
Yeah, there's no, unfortunately, it's the built-in function to Zoom and they don't have a
Oh, Zoom.
confirmation when you completed it.
Okay,
Yeah, but thank you for taking the poll.
sure.
I thank all of you so very much, and come next week with questions. We've got some great speakers coming up next week as well.
Is this an
Thank
appropriate
you.
venue to ask general questions about phase 3 trials and some of the underlying science? I don't know if this is the right room, but this is where I am.
No, it's the,
You can
Okay.
ask. We can answer.
Okay, current news,
You can say a
in
couple of
phase 3
minutes.
on the COVID vaccine. How do we know what it's going to do for people who are pregnant or people who have bariatric surgery? I'm 71. I do 150 push-ups every day. I'm not what you'd call infirm, but I'm way over the test environment. Until I get a vaccine, I can't poke my nose out of the door. As a public health issue, I desperately need quality, underline the word quality, honest, underline the word honest, testing. Where are we with this? What is the scientific community? Forget the political stuff. How are they going to address the national question, assuming we had a few good candidates to work with in terms of vaccine ideas?
So if I'm getting right, so your question is how do we make sure that the phase 2 and phase 3 trials we're going on are good? Is that your question?
For anything, for the optimum first cut, healthy under 65, over 18, I got it. Legal issues, logistics issues, a lot of good reasons to start with that. How long do you have to run a phase 3 trial before you have confidence you don't have the zebras? Not the horses, but you hear hoofbeats, you think horses, but there are zebras out there. How long do you need to run a phase 3 trial? Can you do it in 6 weeks? Do you need 6 months? Do you need a year or two? Then when you open up, how do you take care of people with bariatric surgery, diabetes, pregnancy, over 70? What's the process long-term in terms of public health? Because it's just the beginning of a 2 or 3 year story. This is not the end.
Yeah. So in general, for most, if you're looking at the COVID studies in particular, they're not particularly they're definitely recruiting individuals across all age ranges for the COVID. I don't think there's a particular age limit on those. It depends on the trial. But in general, they're not looking at specific individuals with specific disease groups. They're allowed to enroll. And if you get a large enough numbers, you can actually pull out that data. And so how that happens, so if you think about one of the examples I like to use is, I assume you've used Google Maps at some point or Apple Maps. And that one of the nifty features is that it somehow knows the traffic of every block in New York City at any given time. It's not like Google has cameras on every street corner in New York City, right? Oh, but what they'd actually do is they have every single person with a smartphone is sending data to Google, or if you have an iPhone, you're sending data to Apple 24/7. And Google has an algorithm that reads that data and takes your GPS data to determine, are you standing still, are you taking subway, et cetera, and uses that to figure out what the traffic conditions are like in the city. And so what we do in clinical trials is the same. If you recruit enough participants, you have large enough people, you don't have to specifically recruit people who have bariatric surgery or with a specific disease. You can actually, but once you've recruited enough individuals, you can naturally find that information from the study population.
Oh, excuse me, maybe I misexpressed it. I would think, for instance, if a patient had undergone bariatric surgery, they'd be specifically excluded. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Not as far as I know, they're not excluding those individuals from COVID studies. The only people they're excluding are people who already have COVID is the primary exclusion. Because obviously if you already had COVID, then the vaccine may not do anything for you.
Though the point could be made that if someone's had COVID and don't know it because they're asymptomatic, they just feel badly for a couple of days, the COVID vaccine might kill them unless you check for what are the problems.
Most people,
that have had it.
part of the screening process for most of the COVID studies is that you're tested.
So
Yeah, they would have to
antibodies.
get the antibodies, tested,
Okay,
Not
you
just
know
viral load, they're
something?
looking at antibodies. Okay, cool.
This is an exciting conversation that we're having, but our time is up.
Been a
for
pleasure.
the
Have a good day.
COVID.
Sorry.
Oh, no, don't be sorry. But I want you to know for the COVID trials and the testing, whatever their preliminary requirements are, they're very rigorous, so they stick to that. So when they do carry out their protocol, they take into consideration so many factors that would rule out, seeing anything happen to anyone that would not be conducive to the study. So in other words, they want to keep everybody healthy. They bring you in and they maintain your health as best as they can, fitting within the overall features of their study.
Oh, I don't doubt the integrity of the good folks at Weill. I'm the Weill Cornell representative to all of us. In no way was that an attack of the quality of good science. It's the quality of some people with orange hair. Last question, seriously.
It's good science.
How long is a reasonable runtime for phase 3? Can you do it in 6 months safely?
So, I mean, it all depends on the data. If the data is not looking good, then it will be more than 6 months. Typically, I've worked on studies that have been 2 years going into phase 3.
Could you possibly, even with the best optimal scenario, do it in under 6 months?
Under 6 months, it's highly improbable, but if everything goes right, it is possible.
So
there are zebras in this world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so the main reason vaccine trials typically take a long time is that what you have to do is you have to give people the vaccine and then wait for them to get sick. You can't infect the people after you give them the vaccine. So you have to naturally wait for people to get sick. How long, if there's a wave 2 and a lot of people suddenly get sick, then you'll get data faster, but there is no wave 2 and most of the people recruited don't get sick, then you don't have enough data. So
phrase that way, we should be doing this in Nevada with positivities in 10 to 15%, and not positivities in New York where we're down at anywhere from 1 to 3%.
Yes, areas that have higher infection rates might be better, but then again, what kind of individual would volunteer for a vaccine trial? Is it the type of person who's not social distancing? Are they likely to volunteer? It's a trial, so you have to keep that in mind as well, right?
Thank you so much for your sense of balance. Have a lovely day.
I thank you all and look forward to speaking with all of you next week. Have a great week.
Thank you, you too. Thank you all for coming.